Okay, we are going to get started. It is 1:02. So, Darren, if you could forward to the next slide, please. Okay, hello, everyone. Happy Earth Month. My name is Mary Cap, and I will be your host today. I am an environmental scientist at CalRecycle, focused on food waste prevention, but I also work closely on edible food recovery alongside my colleagues, Danielle Osborne and Kyle Pogue. Today, our team will be sharing a few examples of successful collaborations between local governments and food recovery organizations. We have 3 wonderful presentations lined up for you today before our Q&A session at the end. We also have a couple other edible food recovery experts helping us out today. So I would like to introduce Julia Garcia, Catherine Koch, and Alexis Arends, who will be doing their best to answer some of your questions on the back end of the Q&A function throughout the presentations. Now I would like to introduce Danielle Osborne, our team's edible food recovery lead. Next slide, please.
Hi, everyone. I see some familiar names here today, but for those of you that I maybe haven't interacted with, my name is Danielle Osborne. I'm also an environmental scientist working on the topic of edible food recovery. So this slide may be familiar to many of you, and it shows that now that we're in 2024, our Tier 2 commercial edible food generators are required to comply with SB 1383. Meaning they will need to establish a contract or written agreement with a food recovery organization or service, donate their surplus edible food, and maintain donation records. January 1st, 2024 also marked the start of implementing enforcement efforts against non-compliant generators. Next slide. The SB 1383 goal to recover no less than 20% of disposed edible food by 2025 uses CalRecycle's 2018 waste characterization study to define that baseline. Based on this data, we must recover 231,000 tons of edible food statewide by 2025 and annually thereafter. Based on the 2022 annual report data provided by jurisdictions to CalRecycle, food recovery organizations and services recovered nearly 203,000 tons of edible food in 2022, which puts us at an impressive 87% of the way towards the 1383 target. Even with these impressive numbers, we know that edible food recovery is still a relatively new area for many generator types and for jurisdictions to regulate, with many nuanced topics. Therefore, there are still so many opportunities to grow and strengthen food recovery networks, as well as learn from and share with others, which is what we're hoping to facilitate during today's chat. And with that, I'll pass it off to my manager, Kyle Pogue. And next slide, please.
Thank you, Danielle, and good afternoon, everybody. Looks like we're up to over 200 attendees, so this is exciting. We really appreciate your attendance today and for our presenters' willingness to share their work. As we all know, food recovery in California would not be successful without a wide variety of food recovery organizations providing their services. The importance of these organizations to Californians cannot be overstated. Today, we are excited to highlight the California Association of Food Banks so they can share their members' statewide perspective, and 2 specific organizations in Santa Cruz and San Bernardino counties working closely with jurisdictions to implement edible food recovery programs in these areas. We encourage you all today to also share your insights on how you too are working together to recover food. At this point, I'd like to introduce you to Marshall Graham, a wonderful years-long colleague and friend of mine. As the new branch chief of the Local Assistance and Market Development Branch, who is going to share a few things with us. Marshall, take it away.
How lovely, Kyle. Thank you. I'm extremely excited to be here and be a part of this engagement effort with you. I appreciate our stellar speakers sharing their specific experience and knowledge. Again, a huge thanks to the CalRecycle chat team and our edible food recovery subject matter experts for creating a consistent space for us to share information. This is truly a powerful opportunity for all of us. And like Kyle, I encourage you to participate in the peer share regarding any relevant different ways to navigate through compliance. Regarding updates, I have two regarding CalRecycle's SB 1383 Local Assistance Grant Program. For the first round of funding, which is referred to as OWR 1 and 2 and 3, we're working on processing extensions. And to be specific, the original grant term was to end on May 2nd of this year, and we're extending the due date to November 1st of this year. For the second round of funding, which is referred to as OWR4, invoices should be going out to accounting early next week, so money will be distributed in the next couple of weeks. With that, I look forward to the rest of our chat and learning from our collective involvement.
Thank you, Marshall. Okay, next slide, please. So before we start with our first presenter, I'd like to go over how to submit your questions and comments. So at the bottom of your Zoom window, there should be a speech bubble icon labeled Q&A. If you don't see it there, it may be in the More options with the 3 dots on the very far right side of your screen, or bottom right side of your screen. If you're not familiar with what the icon looks like, it is up on the slide right now. And once you click on that icon, it will open up a window where you can formally submit your questions or comments to us. Please be specific with your questions. Try to include your name, affiliation, and who the question is directed to. We will not be monitoring the Zoom chat, but you are still free to use it to share information or resources with other participants. If you're having difficulties with this function, you may need to check if your Zoom app needs to be updated, or you can simply email your questions to us at slcp.organics@calrecycle.ca.gov. We will be monitoring that inbox throughout the webinar. So again, that's slcp.organics@calrecycle.ca.gov. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so here are our presenters today. Like Kyle mentioned, we have California Association of Food Banks, Second Harvest Food Bank, and a few Santa Cruz County local jurisdictions, and High Desert Second Chance Food Bank. After our presentations, we'll hopefully have about 40 to 45 minutes for Q&A, and then we will wrap up by 3 p.m. So please be ready to write down your questions to ask then, or simply type them into the Q&A Zoom feature. Okay, Darren, if you could pull up our first presenter's slides, please. Now, I would like to introduce our first presenter, Becky Silva. She is the Director of Government Relations at the California Association of Food Banks, where she leads state and federal advocacy to end hunger. Before this, she led advocacy at the San Francisco Marin Food Bank and taught cooking and nutrition classes at FoodLink in Rochester, New York. So let's all give a warm virtual welcome to Becky. Go ahead, Becky.
Thank you so much, Mary. And it's so good to be with you all. I'm so excited that so many folks are tuning in from around the state. And before I dive into my slides, just a huge shout out to CalRecycle for inviting us to participate today. We've been partnering with them and talking through opportunities and issues and challenges and everything in between with SB 1383 edible food recovery for many years now, and they've been such a tremendous resource for our network. So just big thank you to the CalRecycle team for being such a great partner to us in this work. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about CAFB before I dive into more specifics about edible food recovery. So CAFB is a membership organization of 41 food banks. from throughout the state with a shared mission to end hunger in California. So we run a few different programs, which I thought I would just kind of summarize a little bit. So one of the big programs that we're really proud of is our Farm to Family program. So we resource and collect and solicit donations from farmers and producers all across California. And typically how this goes is we might get a phone call from a farmer who says to us, we've got, 5 truckloads of onions and we don't know what to do with them. We don't want them. We can't sell them. And then we would say, great, we'll take them. And then we would put a call out to our 41 member food banks to say, who wants how much of the onions? So just as an example. We also do a lot of CalFresh outreach work. So CalFresh is our state SNAP program, or what you might know of as food stamps. So we hold one of California's largest CalFresh outreach contracts, and then we subcontract with about 50 partners to help families to navigate the process of applying for CalFresh benefits. And then my team, we do a lot of state and federal advocacy on issues relating to hunger, issues that food banks are facing, and kind of more broadly around anti-poverty work as well. We also do a lot of member services work, from hosting webinars to technical assistance for our 41 member food banks. And then we also have a new department now that is dedicated to doing research about hunger and our network of food banks, and also recently more research around SB 1383 implementation. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we represent 41 member food banks. We're often really proud to say that every county in California is served by a food bank. The little dots that are little pairs, our logo, are locations of food banks around the whole state. And they really run the spectrum in terms of size, in terms of whether they are in urban areas or rural areas, in terms of types of programs that they offer. We always say that no two food banks are exactly the same. Also, just to mention that many food banks serve multiple counties as well. So for example, I live in Santa Rosa in Sonoma County, and my local food bank is the Redwood Empire Food Bank, which serves Sonoma, Humboldt, Del Norte, Mendocino, and Lake counties, just as an example. And also, on the flip side, some counties have multiple food banks within them. And this is a link, which I'm just going to try to multitask here and put into the chat. This is a link where you can look up your local food bank by county. So if you're not sure what your local food bank is, you can use that link to find which one you might want to connect with if you're not already connected. Next slide. And so there's often a little bit of confusion, and these kind of terms get used interchangeably around what is a food bank versus what is a food pantry. And so kind of the simple way that I think about it is that food banks are typically a very big warehouse that work with food pantries to distribute food to clients. So you can think of food banks as sort of the Costco's of the world. They are generally very large warehouses that typically clients don't visit directly. And food banks would distribute their food out to food pantries, which is on the right here. And collectively, our food bank network partners with about 6,000 food pantries around the whole state. So these are your churches, your YMCAs, your community centers, schools, libraries, parks, places where food banks go to set up food distribution sites, where clients and families would then come to pick up their groceries. Next slide. So as you can imagine, there has been a huge impact to food banks from the COVID-19 pandemic and on hunger, more broadly. So just as a couple of examples, and I feel like this is really important context, if you are thinking about if you're representing a jurisdiction and thinking about partnering with a food bank, I think this context is really helpful. So today there are about 5.4 million people on CalFresh benefits. compared to about 3.8 million in June of 2019. So I just think that really shows the huge spike and the fact that people are looking for resources to help feed themselves and their families. I can also share that about 26% of households with children are experiencing food insecurity today, with really deep disparities, especially for Black and Latinx households as well. So hunger is definitely not subsided. You know, with the ending of many temporary public supports like expanded CalFresh benefits, the child tax credit, expanded unemployment benefits, you know, there were many programs that were helping to support low-income families through the duration of the pandemic. Most of them have now ended. And so that means that we are seeing a spike in hunger with people visiting food banks as one of their few options for keeping their families nourished. Next slide. And so this is just a visual of what I was just talking about, and I will put this link in the chat now as well. So over 20% of California households are food insecure. Like I mentioned, 26% of families with children. And we are continuously updating this as we have new information and new data. And so please feel free to use this as a resource and bookmark it if you're interested in tracking these kinds of trends in food insecurity and hunger across the state. Next slide. So we recently did a survey of our member food banks just to get a sense of how our food bank network is faring amidst, you know, funding cuts and also increased demand that we're hearing about as well. And so, you know, really alarmingly, 75% of food banks said that they're having to make tough decisions to scale back their services because of budget constraints. And so you see some of those examples here. So about 60% of food banks said that they're limiting or reducing the variety of food that they're offering to households. About half said that they are limiting or reducing the amount of food offered per household in an effort to serve more families. Some are saying that they're scaling back their programming. And also not on this chart, but I can share that some are even reporting that they're having to close distribution sites because they don't have enough resources to keep those distribution sites open. So I just really wanted to show this as as kind of context about the constraints that food banks are operating within today. Next slide. So now kind of moving more specifically to SB 1383. So you know, we can say that food banks always are in need of food and that many have been recovering food for decades. And so I think we really see SB 1383 as an opportunity to strengthen and form new partnerships of increasing food donations, but also with the context that this is not new work to food banks. There are often organizations that are very well established in their communities, have been around for literally decades. And some of them already have really close relationships with local retailers, food waste generators to collect food and help to get it out to community members who need it. And so we see it again as a really big opportunity to strengthen that work. Next slide. So food banks use different kinds of systems and models to collect and distribute donated food. And so I'm just going to share a few. And before I do that, let me just put into the chat the link that's on this slide here. So the first two models on the left there are by far the most common in our network. In the first model, food banks receive food directly from donors and distribute from their warehouse. And then in the second model, food bank partners pick up the food and distribute it without it first ever coming to the food bank. And sometimes the food bank might help to facilitate those relationships and communication to make it easier for the local food pantries to accept those donations. And also just to say that some food banks use a combination of those two different models depending on who the partner is that they're working with. And then on the right, a few food banks participate in the third model, which is when there's a third party that coordinates whether food from a particular donor goes to the food bank or another organization. So I know that there is quite a few local organizations out there that run apps or different kinds of sort of tools for connecting food waste generators with local food banks or food pantries. And so just wanted to kind of highlight 3 different types of models. And again, some food banks use a combination of 1 or 2 or even 3. But just to paint the picture that there are different ways that food banks navigate accepting donations and then getting it back out into the community. Next slide. So just a few ideas and kind of ways to think about partnering with food banks if you aren't already. So one thing that we would recommend right off the bat is to reach out to your local food bank if you don't already have that relationship. And so I know I shared the link to find the local food bank in your county. And also please feel free to reach out to me if I can help to facilitate introductions or connections to staff at your local food bank as well. We would also encourage you to think about engaging them in capacity planning. Often food banks really have their finger on the pulse in terms of what the barriers are or what infrastructure is needed in terms of recovering more food. So definitely encourage you to ask your local food bank about what capacity they need in order to recover more food. And also just to ask them what resources they need, whether they're struggling with staffing or infrastructure, or there may be a whole host of different things that food bank needs support with. So really encourage you to engage them in those conversations. And then also, as you think about this, keeping in mind that some counties have 2 food banks. So you may want to reach out to both. And also that kind of on the opposite side of that some food banks may be working with multiple jurisdictions. So the example that sticks in my mind is the Los Angeles Regional Food Bank, which I can't remember now how many jurisdictions they said they work with, but I think it was like dozens. And so just to kind of flag that please be patient with food banks if they're communicating and working with multiple jurisdictions at the same time. Next slide. So just kind of zooming out, more broadly in terms of implications for SB 1383 implementation for food banks. Like I shared, this has been a tough few years for food banks in terms of dealing with COVID-19, dealing with, funding decreases in recent years, spikes in hunger in their communities, things like that. And so food banks, what they really need is ongoing resources in order to, support them in coordinating, storing, and distributing more food. Next slide. And so this is just an example that I wanted to share. So this is slightly dated, but still relevant. In the fall of 2021, we did a survey of our 41 member food banks to just kind of get a sense of how they were all doing through the COVID-19 crisis, knowing that the public health emergency put an enormous strain on food banks. So the statewide need for one-time improvements for food banks and their local agencies. So we're talking about things like refrigeration units, trucks, expanded warehouse space, forklifts, you name it, all the things that are needed to run a warehouse. The costs across our network totaled over 600 million. And so, as you can imagine, food banks are always trying to do more with less. And so I think always appreciate opportunities for funding or resources that jurisdictions can share with them to help them recover more food and feed more community members locally. So that was it from me. My contact information is on the next slide, and I will turn it back over to the CalRecycle team.
Thank you, Becky. All right. Okay. As a reminder to our participants, we will address your questions after all 3 presentations, but you may submit them at any point throughout the webinar through the Q&A function and not the chat. Next up, we have some folks from Santa Cruz County. Please help me welcome Jose Barajas and Fernando Cardenas from Second Harvest Food Bank. We also have Darcel Pruitt from County of Santa Cruz and Tammy Stolzenthaler from City of Watsonville Public Works. Go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mary, for that introduction. So again, my name is Jose Barajas, and I'm the Chief Programs Officer here at Second Harvest Food Bank, Santa Cruz County. Fun fact, we are actually the first food bank in California, and we're the second in the nation. So we were founded in 1972. So I'll go ahead and have my other team members introduce themselves and, kind of share a little bit about what we do here in Santa Cruz County in partnership with our local jurisdictions. Thank you very much. Next slide.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Josue. I'll go ahead and begin. I'll be kind of guiding us through our couple of slides here. So we'll be diving into 3 main topics, which is collaboration, best practices, and goals and opportunities. So within collaboration, we'll be talking about some meetings and working groups. For best practices, we'll be talking about reporting, site visits, and inspections. And then lastly, we'll be going into capacity building and just strengthening the collaboration. So next slide, please. And to start us off with collaboration, I will hand it over to Darcy. So next slide, please.
First, I'd like to say thank you to Fernando and Josue for inviting Santa Cruz County to participate in this meeting, and for Tammy's support in Watsonville, because she has been just a tremendous coordinator in bringing together the collaborative work that we've been doing in Santa Cruz County, and really the collaborative meetings in Santa Cruz County that have developed into a much deeper regional kind of, it's not just SB 1383 collaboration, but has strengthened our task force and other things that we do together. Really started out with the SB 1383 capacity planning work that we needed to do. And we sort of hit the ground running in probably May of 2022, bringing together the jurisdictions. We reached out to all of now Santa Cruz County is a pretty small county, so there are 5 local jurisdictions if you include the County of Santa Cruz, but it took us a lot to get all together on the same page. We did a lot of co-learning by setting up these collaborative meetings to focus on capacity planning. We started out meeting bi-weekly to really figure out what everybody was doing and what we were planning, focused on a lot of collaboration. In coming together in those bi-weekly meetings, we tried to leverage all of the work that was already being done at the local jurisdictions. And we found out that, some people had developed outreach materials, other people were developing surveys, and we kind of put it all together in those 2 months before the August deadline for submitting our capacity planning to be able to, really do something much better countywide than we would have done individually. Next slide, please. And those meetings really developed not only into a pretty good and comprehensive capacity planning report, but it also developed into a think tank for SB 1383 edible food recovery generally. We learned from each other. We were sharing our talents and resources and sample documents, but also it kind of worked like a sort of part think tank, part support group that I think everybody really appreciated. We realized the benefits of working together and made a lot of commitments to doing more work together that I'll talk about a little later. And I'll hand it back to Fernando.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Darcy. And next slide, please. And Josue, if you'd like to dive into record keeping.
Absolutely. So with record keeping, that's kind of been the role that the food bank has played. As I mentioned in the beginning, part of being in the food bank and part of being one of the 41 food banks that's in the state that Becky mentioned earlier, is that we also have bigger umbrella, Feeding America. And so within Feeding America, a lot of the contracts with the corporate organizations such as Albertsons, Target, Costco, Sam's Club, and so forth are housed there. Here at the food bank locally in Santa Cruz, we have a lot more of the mom and pop shops. So we keep track of those other smaller, smaller franchise kind of grocery stores that are here. And we service and we collect some of that data on a monthly basis. And so this actually is a screenshot of the Tableau. So we're able to kind of use a Tableau website and kind of manipulate the data to make it look very fancy and very nice. You can actually see some numbers from last June, because every year we're actually reporting that yearly data to the jurisdiction so that they know who were the ones that were who were the donors that donated the food, how much food they donated, and what were the categories. And we're also very fortunate to have about 64 agency networks within the food bank. And so we're very lucky that they're the ones that are out there collecting the food and also redistributing it out to the community. And the food bank serves as this hub that kind of collects the data from them on a monthly basis. And when the jurisdictions and the donors request data, that's something that the food bank is able to kind of reproduce and send it to them. We normally do it on a monthly basis, but for some small mom and pop shops, they usually want it every other month. And so we make sure that we work on their occurrences and we give them this actual sheet. So you're actually getting a live sheet that we, again, used for the local jurisdictions, but also what we would give, say, New Leaf, which is a store nearby. They get their pounds that they collected or that they distributed out, and who the agencies were that received those pounds. So it's a kind of snapshot that they get, and they get to keep for themselves. And so that's kind of the food bank's role in all of this, as well as being a thought partner and also having these partnerships with the rest of the nonprofits and government agencies that are our partner agencies. Thank you very much. Next slide.
Awesome. Thanks, Josue. So next up, site visits and inspections. So Tammy, take it away.
So thanks, Fernando and Josue. We certainly appreciate collaborating with you on this partnership. And I'm Tammy Stolzenthaler. I'm representing the city of Watsonville. Watsonville is a city of about 45,000 residents, and we offer full solid waste collection service. And I know that many of you attending are representing jurisdictions and are likely conducting your food recovery visits and inspections, or perhaps gearing up and considering how to run your program in the near future. Therefore, I wanted to take a few minutes to share Watsonville's tips and experience. As for the site visits to our Tier 1 and Tier 2 generators, we have found that year one is really an educational opportunity where we're going out and building a relationship with the Tier 1 and Tier 2 management and explaining the requirements. So in 2022, this was the case with the Tier 1, and now in 2024 with the Tier 2 regulations. We conduct most of our site visits along with managers from the food bank, Fernando or Josue. And we want to make sure that we made an appointment with the lead management contacts at each Tier 1 and Tier 2 before we visit. We want to make sure that we have the site manager, the produce manager, and hopefully even a corporate representative. It's really great to have the corporate representative as a contact to request, because they're very key to the business policies and to implementing the food recovery agreement. If you can't see the corporate rep at the site visit, be sure to ask for their name and their email, and you can include them in the follow-up email after the site visit. When making a site visit, the key is that I really want to witness some kind of food donation program happening. I want to see that they have a place set aside where they're separating whole foods and not just throwing it out into the organic bin or into the trash. If there's no evidence of these food donations that you want to see, I ask guiding questions for progress and in saying, okay, well, this was information given to you since 2022. What's your progress in making this happen? And how are you going to make the weight records happen and the agreement? As for really small distributors that deal with really fresh foods, sometimes I call them rather than visit because many of them are very small with perishable food only, and they really don't have anything significant to safely donate. So we talk on the phone and have that discussion. So now for inspections, here we are in the third year of Tier 1. I've been conducting a try inspection because we're going to the Tier 1, so I might as well be checking on the 3 things that are required of the Tier 1. I'm inspecting for a food recovery program. I want to see the weight records and the local agreement. And in the same visit, I'm also inspecting to make sure that they're self-hauling their organics, and and recycling too. I want to see that separation going on behind the scene. I also check for my local foodware ordinances. So consider that, if you have your local foodware ordinances, you are there at your Tier 1, you can check at the deli too for the foodware implementation. What has really made a difference in our Tier 1 progress is the documentation checklist that you can see on the left here on the screen. We're actively documenting if the vendor is in compliance, if they're partially in compliance, or in compliance. And if we're not seeing the progress, we can note specifically what the requirements are that we want to see, and that I will state that we are returning within 60 days to follow up. Also, taking pictures really helps with the follow-up and the record. And I want to ask for the corporate management contacts to follow up by email, because they really need to support their sites with the regulations. And now back to Josue with the next slide.
All right, so we're going to be focusing on the primary goals and opportunities, and this is one of the things that we're starting to now focus on in terms of our collaboration with the jurisdictions. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Josue, and thanks, Tammy. This is Darcy Pruitt again with Santa Cruz County, and I'm here to talk about the way we've strengthened collaborations over time. And I talked about initially how we were meeting bi-weekly, really focused on capacity planning, but because the capacity planning had gone so well for us and we'd made such good contacts, we continued to meet, and now we meet bi-monthly, but then we meet more frequently when we have things that are important that we want to talk about. And one of the things that we started meeting more frequently about was how to use the SB 1383 local area assistance grants to strengthen our collaboration with the food bank, understanding the kinds of things that Becky Silva was talking about when she was giving her CAFB presentation, is how much strain the food banks are under after what's happened post-pandemic. So the jurisdictions, while we normally meet with the food bank and a lot of our other smaller food recovery organizations, basically it's an open invitation to anybody who wants to come to our meetings who have something to kind of bring up about edible food recovery. What we did was we had some jurisdiction only meetings, and we were meeting about once a week or twice a week to talk about the SB 1383 food recovery, the food recovery parts of how we were going to spend our SB 1383 local assistance grants. And we came up with these 3 kind of general categories of, the need to continue to do our capacity planning together, and then determining the needs of local food recovery organizations, and then think about how we were going to really develop our tier 2 edible food recovery capacity, realizing that that's not really inside of the scope of the things that food banks typically do. So we had a lot of meetings, and we really got down to, and I think we can go to the next slide, developing a list of the things that we would want in terms of edible food recovery services that we could put together as a service contract that we could collaborate on and pull money from across our local jurisdictions, so the county and the cities working together. And what we did was we came up with this list of work that we wanted to put together into an RFP for edible food recovery services. And we also agreed that between the 5 jurisdictions, we would devote a little over $250,000 over the next 2 years to support these initiatives. And I think that really says something of how much we value the support that the food bank and our other food recovery organizations have provided to the jurisdictions in Santa Cruz County, and we're trying to continue to support that work. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Darcy. And next slide, please.
Oh, wait a second. Can I say one more thing?
Go for it.
We also released the RFP yesterday, so it's actually out on the street if you want to take a look at it, and I can put that link in the chat if you're interested.
Perfect. Thanks, Darcy. So just want to take a moment to appreciate Darcy and Tammy. Thank you so much for your time and for agreeing to collaborate with us on this project. And a huge shout out to CalRecycle for allowing us to spotlight food recovery in Santa Cruz County. So here's our contact information. Feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you, Fernando, Josue, Darcy, and Tammy. It is a pleasure to have you all here too. And lastly, for our third presentation, we have the president of High Desert Second Chance Food Bank. She is also the executive director of the High Desert Food Collaborative Program. And this is all located in San Bernardino County. So please help me welcome Ms. Christina Kennedy.
Thank you, Mary. Good afternoon, everyone. I just really quickly want to reiterate what Becky and Jesu said and thank CalRecycle for having us and hosting this monthly webinar. It has been hugely beneficial with the work that we all do. So thank you for having us. I'm excited to present on how we amplify our impact here in the High Desert region of San Bernardino County, specifically addressing SB 1383 and collaborating with our local jurisdictions, our haulers, and especially County Environmental Health Department. I truly believe, and so does the rest of our collaborative, in SB 1383 and how it is a pivotal California law that presents, of course, both issues, a challenge, and an opportunity for our community to make a significant stride in sustainability and food security. Next slide. So just a little bit of a backstory. High Desert Second Chance was established in 2014 as a street ministry. We were serving the homeless population by providing hot meals, care kits, and clothing. And then within our first year, we kind of expanded our outreach and began holding weekly food distribution. This initial step kind of ignited a chain reaction of growth. And we now operate 11 major programs, 9 of which I've listed below. So we have our emergency veteran services, senior services. We do a weekly food distribution, last of the month USDA commodities distribution. We have an emergency pantry, rent and utility protection program. We hold a financial literacy workshop on site. And then we also do homebound deliveries to seniors and veterans, as well as student lunch program. The last two are our most notable, which is the High Desert Food Collaborative program, which we're going to be focusing on today. The High Desert Food Collaborative is a network system of 103 MOU-driven partners. This includes food pantries, community service providers, faith-based ministries, school sites, healthcare providers. We all collaborate. We have a collaborative approach that enables us to maximize our resources here in the High Desert. This includes surplus food and then services to provide a greater impact across the High Desert region. Our last one is our No Food Goes to Waste program. Our No Food Goes to Waste program is another notable initiative that addressed food waste and sustainability. This program refers to any product that's not edible for human consumption. We have partnerships with over 200 local farmers, livestock owners, local zoos, animal rescues, and of course, a multitude of composters and garden clubs who have signed contracts to participate in our program. Next slide. So our mission and focus. Here at High Desert Second Chance and through our High Desert Food Collaborative program, our mission has always been very singular and clear, to feed the people. Unwavering focus on this purpose has been the cornerstone of our success. When we align our efforts with this mission, we find that we can make a significant impact in our community. And then working with the JPA on the rollout and implementation of SB 1383 has aligned perfectly with our mission to feed the people. By collaborating with the JPA and leveraging our existing programs and partnerships, we have effectively addressed the requirements of SB 1383, reducing organic waste, combating climate change, and supported food insecure populations up here in the High Desert. I'm going to keep saying that because we are just the High Desert region of San Bernardino County. Next slide. Just a little bit about Mojave Desert and Mountain Recycling Authority, which is a JPA, our local jurisdictions. Mojave Desert and Mountain Recycling Authority consists of these jurisdictions: Adelanto, Apple Valley, Barstow, Big Bear Lake, Needles, San Bernardino County, 29 Palms, Victorville, and Yucca Valley. The Joint Powers of Authority was formed in 1992 to work on regional issues with a regional approach. They cover about 15,000 square miles with an estimated population of 393,776, and that excludes military bases. Next slide. Part of our collaboration with local jurisdictions, of course, involves conducting inspections to ensure compliance with SB 1383. Our city waste management inspects, our representatives from city waste management perform inspections. They've performed it throughout the year with our generators to ensure compliance with SB 1383 regulations. But High Desert Second Chance also does our own inspections separately. With our inspections, we inspect the generators to address donatable foods, the process of pickup, mediate meetings with food recovery organizations, and establish reporting processes for both the generators and the FRO. Additionally, we conduct surprise inspections on FRO sites during services to monitor food handling practices. And then, of course, we also work with the health department. And if there's issues where a site requires further inspections, we do reach out to them. Our goal, of course, is always to protect the people we serve by ensuring that each point of contact is providing the utmost care and service. We've been very fortunate to have the support of Vertec Waste and Energia over the last 2 years. Vertec Waste has been instrumental as they sought funding to support our capacity building needs, and Energia as well, which they have supported us with the help of John Davis through the JPA. And we were awarded a 1,400 square foot walk-in refrigeration unit. And then most recently, we just were awarded a refrigerated trailer to help in our efforts. These collaborations and research further enable us to effectively address SB 1383 requirements and reduce food waste and support food insecure populations up here. Next slide. Working with tier 1s and tier 2 generators, both jurisdictions and the High Desert Second Chance Collaborative, we work closely with the tier 1 and tier 2. Part of it is the education and training. Both our jurisdiction and us, we do conduct education and training sessions for tier 1 and tier 2 generators. This could encompass anything from planning exercises such as working with local hospital sites, school nutrition departments, hotel sites, and event centers on the donated process, reviewing releases and waivers of liability, and then addressing concerns related to the donations. Funding is of course a crucial aspect of our operations, and we can honestly admit that we have gotten zero funding other than the work that we do with our local jurisdiction to implement SB 1383 and the work that we do. We have had to be very diligent in the way that we operate our programs in order to have the least amount of cost involved, but with the greatest amount of impact. So as previously mentioned, of course, our primary focus is on feeding the people. So of course, we prioritize strategic planning to achieve the greatest impact at minimal cost. We support from our jurisdictions. Our collaboration with the jurisdictions has been invaluable in providing support tailored to the needs of the food recovery organizations within their jurisdictions. For example, I could say for 2 jurisdictions, and I believe they're here today, have committed to purchasing refrigerated trailer units to maximize the capture of donations in their cities for local FROs. And then another jurisdiction has provided a building to host a satellite hub for High Desert Food Collaborative to work out of, along with a purchase of a refrigerated trailer to optimize donations within a shared space. These collaborative efforts have significantly alleviated the cost for FROs at multiple levels. Our FROs recognize the benefits of SB 1383 and how it will enhance their programs while also reducing costs of supplies. I like to say our jurisdiction is better than yours. In all honesty, I truly do believe that. Next slide. So focusing on the reporting process, each jurisdiction has access to our records. These records are also shared with the Environmental Health Department so that all 3 sectors are working cohesively and not overlapping or double counting poundage. High Desert Second Chance holds and provides a digitally signed master agreement for generators and FROs for the reporting process. And then recently we have moved towards getting generators on our digital reporting system by providing them with individual licenses. We assure compliance with food recovery agencies as it's written in our MOU contract. Agencies that are not in compliance will have services suspended with council review. This allows us to ensure generators are audit ready with accurate reporting. And I can give you an example. In 2022, one of our generators was audited on donations provided and was found to have a little over 90,000 pounds of donated product that was unaccounted for. We were able to go through our records and find where the discrepancies lay, and then it was resolved. Next slide. Data collection. So each FRO keeps a record of donations based on the store number, type of food, pounds donated, date of donation, and then of course the donor signature and contact information. Each jurisdiction can monitor the report spreadsheet. They have access to that. We do a verification notification that goes out to our online reporting and this goes back to our online reporting and trying to find a similar way of for generators to report and cut out all the additional paperwork. By giving them a link to report donations each time they donate and by department, we can better track and verify their data. They also can review FRO reporting and verify the accuracy of that FRO's data that's being reported. This is with the audit compliance. This goes back to our MOU and contract with our partner agencies. For example, in February and March, we held surprise site visits on partners as they were at the generators, picking up and from there to the sites. Our goal, for one, was to monitor the condition of donations being received. 2 was the process by both the receiving manager and the FRO, and then of course following our FRO to site and monitoring them at their site. We verify how the FRO is keeping records and maintaining their donations, site conditions, and so forth. Next slide. I can't say enough how collaboration is key. Led by John Davis with the JPA, a regional approach to SB 1383 with the San Bernardino County Environmental Health Department and our jurisdictions and High Desert Second Chance involves a collaborative and coordinated effort among these entities to implement and comply with the requirements at a regional level, rather than each entity working independently. This includes collaborative planning and implementation. John facilitates monthly meetings. I wish he was here, but he was unable to make it. But John facilitates monthly meetings between the agencies to go over progress and shortfalls. As some of our jurisdiction that are here today, our representatives, they can actually attest to that as we are dealing with addressing the shortfalls per Environmental Health Department records, as well as address the needs of our jurisdiction. San Bernardino County Environmental Health Department provides support and oversight to ensure that jurisdictions and organizations are compliant with SB 1383 regulations. They collect and analyze data related to SB 1383 compliance and then performance metrics from jurisdictions and High Desert Second Chance. For the jurisdictions, we work together with the Environmental Health Department to develop and implement regional plans and strategies for organic waste reduction, food recovery, and other SB 1383 requirements. For High Desert Second Chance, of course, our focus is on food recovery and redistribution efforts, ensuring that the surplus food is rescued and provided to those in need, thereby reducing the food waste and supporting food insecure individuals and families. And next, I believe that's it. So here is my contact information, as well as John Davis with Mojave Desert and Mountain Recycling Authority. Thank you for having me again.
Thank you, Christina. So we have some time before Q&A. I would like to ask if any of the San Bernardino County local jurisdiction staff attending today that work with Christina, if any of you would like to provide your input and experience for us, that would be great. You can identify yourself in the Q&A and we can try to unlock your unmute button to share over audio. So just give us a second.
Here I am. Hi, I'm Cindy Poor with the City of Victorville. I'm the Environmental Programs Specialist here and responsible for helping our jurisdiction be compliant. And I work with Christina and High Desert Second Chance since 2015 when I first started with the city. The organization is amazing. I know that I go out and talk to generators in our city, and Christina will send somebody over and get whatever they have. I've ran into different businesses that weren't happy with whomever was picking it up. It was sporadic. And I said, well, you know, talk to Christina at High Desert Second Chance. And they're just amazing with their dependability. And you know, I can count on them to take care of the stuff. And I love the online access, so I can see everything that they have for us, that they've been doing and collecting, and they're very easy to work with. So I couldn't be happier. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Sydney.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Cindy. Is there anyone else, Christina, that you recognize that we?
I see Jessica Reed is here and Brenda Lopez as well. And I believe Katya is here from Big Bear. I can't.
Would any of you like to chime in?
I see someone else is here for Jessica Reed.
Yeah.
Jessica's
Sorry, Jessica wasn't able to make it today. For myself, I work with a food pantry in Barstow. And I hate to say it, we're not involved with Second Chance. There's another organization in town that is New Hope Village. And wait, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't sure. I'm watching my screen here. But Second Chance does work with another organization in the community, New Hope Village, and nothing but raves in regards to Second Chance. I just want to say nothing but raves in regards to Second Chance. You know, they bring trucks up on a weekly basis to help with the distribution to the at-risk hungry in the community. As far as with the organization I'm with, Desert Manna, we do a lot of the edible food recovery up in the Barstow community, including the 2 military bases out here. The month of March, we had recovered 8 tons of food between all of our sources up here. But like I said, in regards to Second Chance, absolutely wonderful. Jessica Reed does often refer to Second Chance as far as collecting information. Very accurate. Sorry. You called out the name. I put something out there. Sorry, I'm sorry I don't have much more to contribute on that.
Well, that was perfect. Thank you. Okay. I think we're gonna move on to Q&A. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you to all 6 of you for choosing to be here and sharing your stories and your work on our platform. Okay, so there we go. Thank you, Darren. Before we open up the floor for questions, let's go over some Q&A expectations together. This is a reminder for all of you that this is not just a space to ask questions of our presenters, but also a space for us to exchange ideas, learn about new perspectives, and create connections to help support each other's food recovery efforts. Understand that we are all motivated to ensure the success of food recovery programs, and that we're motivated to continue to learn about and respect the complex landscape of food recovery. Remember that every contribution is worthwhile. Let's be mindful of others waiting to ask questions, and remember to speak with care and respect towards your peers. I would like to attribute this slide to our friends at Alameda County Food Recovery Network, who we modeled these guidelines after and who inspired us to insert them here in this webinar. This is something we've seen, especially with Alameda County Food Recovery Network, that can help foster successful collaboration inside and outside working groups. Inside and outside working groups. Okay, next slide, please. Again, please submit your official questions and comments in the Q&A function found at the bottom of the Zoom window with the speech bubble icon labeled Q&A. You may continue to use the chat, but any questions in there will not be monitored or answered live. We will try to get to as many different questions as possible, but if we do not get to your question, you can submit it to our SLCP Organics inbox, and we can follow up with you afterwards. Some of you may be called on to speak if you would like to ask your question over audio. In that case, we will unlock your ability to unmute yourself and then just start off with your name and affiliation to help us with documentation and follow-up. And lastly, we are specifically looking for questions for our presenters, examples of collaborative successes, and/or ideas for better collaboration. And now I'll hand it off to Katie.
All right. The first question I have in the queue currently is from Kristen Sales of Sonoma County. Kristen, you should be able to unmute yourself now. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. So my question was basically for Santa Cruz County, working with Second Harvest Food Bank. So you said that you were sort of using Second Harvest to get capacity planning data from their partners. But how do you capture capacity planning data from food recovery organizations or services that are not affiliated with Second Harvest? And for those sort of unaffiliated food recovery organizations or services, how do you ensure that there's an equitable distribution of funding and resources for them, as opposed to like going through the food bank?
Darcel, if you'd like to go ahead and answer that, please go ahead. You should be able to unmute.
Sure, Kristen and Catherine, thank you for the question. We work pretty closely with the food bank. They've been very good about collecting data from the food recovery organizations that they work with, which actually covers most of the food recovery organizations that collect directly from edible food generators. And we have really focused, obviously our capacity planning is really focused on making sure the people who are doing the SB 1383 work are in the survey. But we've also reached out through them because the food bank provides a lot of food that's recovered in other ways, not from edible food generators. So we actually get more data with the food bank than we would just approaching all of the 80 to 100 organizations that are out there. But for the, especially the larger food recovery organizations that are collecting directly from our tier ones and will be tier twos, we go to them directly and they provide us information directly, because a few of our edible food recovery organizations aren't willing to enter their data into Feeding America. So to get the right capacity data, we actually do need to do kind of like 2-level outreach. And so far, before this edible food recovery grant, we haven't provided money locally, and this is an opportunity for us to do that. So I hope that answers your whole question. So we haven't provided funding up until now, and we're working on doing that.
Yeah, thank you, Darcel. It was basically just, I'm finding in my jurisdiction that we do have a large California food bank, associated food bank, but we also have a lot of organizations that do not report their data to the food bank, and in the Feeding America network. And so I am finding myself having to do that 2-level outreach, basically, is to both get data filtered through the food bank, but also go directly to the other organizations and ask them similar questions.
Yeah, and honestly, part of the reason that we wanted to put together the RFP was to make sure that we covered the Carrot app. And so getting the outreach, because the Carrot app, the jurisdictions will purchase, but it's free to both the generators and the food recovery organizations. And we're hoping that that will both help with tier 2, but also help with all of our reporting for any of the jurisdictions that use that app.
Yeah,
So
we're using that as well.
yeah.
But
we don't know how that'll go yet, because we haven't been using it up until now. But that's certainly something that we've rolled into kind of the outreach portion of the RFP.
Yeah, us as well. Yeah, we have consultants going out, basically saying that this is a resource available that's free to any food recovery organization or EFG. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Kristen and Darcel. Our next question is from Emmeline Cardozo. Emmeline, you should be able to unmute yourself and please go ahead and ask your question.
Sure, thank you. Thanks to all of the presenters today, really interesting examples. And this question is also for the Santa Cruz County team that presented second in the lineup. So would love to hear if you think that your think tank collaboration model could or should be replicated across different counties, and what some of the considerations might be there. And would also love to understand what role CalRecycle played in your collaboration, and is there room for further engagement with CalRecycle? Thank you.
I guess I can take that one again. Yeah, well, so I think that our collaborative model could work we actually leveraged our task force to reach out to our jurisdictions. Now, I realize that Santa Cruz County has a pretty limited number of local jurisdictions. There's 5 of us all together, so it's pretty easy for us to kind of come together and collaborate and have those difficult conversations that you need to have when you're deciding on like the things that you're going to do together, and how to build and fund collaborations. But I think it's possible to do it on a bigger scale. CalRecycle was really helpful, especially at the initial stages of us getting together, in terms of we had a really great LAMD, both with Diana, who's on the call today, but also with Ann Snyder, who I didn't see on the call today, who really helped facilitate our learning together, which was awesome. They would both answer our questions directly, but also kind of link us in and invite other people from CalRecycle who were issue area experts to help us, answer questions about grants and capacity planning and other kinds of things, so it ended up being kind of a brain trust for us. And I think there was a third part of your question that I don't remember since it's not on the screen anymore.
Yes, and I'm not sure, I think it was someone else who spoke to that point, so thanks for that response. My third question was around, there had been an example shared with Feeding America, kind of being that interface with the Costco's of the world. Is that kind of the preferred model within the Brain Trust? Is there room for multiple models, or maybe interest in engaging with grocers directly? Or is kind of the current state meeting your needs?
We actually, and I think the different jurisdictions do it differently. We certainly work with the food bank and their Feeding America model, because that's one place where it's kind of one-stop shopping for some of the data that we need for our ear reporting. But we also, have relationships with other larger food recovery organizations that do a lot of the collection work. We have one really big partner in Gray Bears here and they collect, almost 2 million pounds of food themselves. And that was, I think, for a 6-month period that we had. They're actually in the unincorporated county, so I know a little bit more about them. But then, like in the city of Watsonville, which I think Tammy could speak to, she's got a lot of smaller grocers who come in, and also smaller food vendors and distributors that they work with one-on-one that aren't in the Feeding America, so we have a multi-leveled approach, and it really depends on who's inside the jurisdiction, how that approach works.
Yeah, I think from a food bank perspective, it's definitely something that can get replicated if you reach out to your local food bank, if you haven't already, because as we mentioned, part of being in a network of 41 food banks and part of being in a nationwide network of 250 other food banks is that not only is it, those 250 food banks, we're coming in with, thousands more partner agencies that sometimes have been doing a lot of the grocery rescue even before SB 1383 was a thing. And so leaning on their expertise and leaning on one entity, which in this case, is the food bank, is Feeding America to some extent, with some of the platforms that they've created to data collect, it's been, in my opinion, it's been easier because there's, instead of, the jurisdictions going into each individual agency to collect that data, they come and ask us, we provide that data, and we're already providing that data for our participation every month from our agencies. So I think it just makes it a little bit cleaner, but it makes it a little bit easier because you're having those checks and balances of collecting the data, of looking for the data, and then also just making sure that, there's not an opportunity for, if there's something that gets lost in transition, there's somebody that you can you can point to. And that's, Fernando, that's what his role is making sure that all the data gets collected, making sure that all the jurisdictions are, getting what they need. And as Tammy mentioned in the slide, the inspections are also what's important. And so we make an effort to go out to the Costco's and Albertsons too, so that they know who we are, because obviously if we reach out to a corporate Costco, they're not going to know to a certain extent how much produce and how much non-food items are being distributed out through the grocery rescue project. And so that's why those site visits going hand in hand makes a difference, because they see you and they know who you are.
All right, thanks, Josue. Tammy, did you want to add on to that?
Yeah, just to add on to that briefly, is that I know in Watsonville, when we visited sites tier 1, we want to be able to see not just an agreement with Feeding America. We want to see that the local connection and where's the food actually going to, locally, especially because a lot of times with the Feeding America records, we can't see where that food is actually ending up. And there's plenty of need here within the county, which can keep food closer, reduce greenhouse gases. And we have more interaction there with the local FROs that are saying that they have more capacity. So yeah, the Feeding America contract is fine, but I even heard CalRecycle say in the last webinars that they really need to have, in addition, they need to have the local contacts noted somewhere. And that way we can keep better track of what's actually happening and make sure it's really going to people in need. Thank you.
Yes, that is exactly correct. We do not consider having the simple agreement with the National Feeding America organization to be sufficient for a commercial edible food generator. They need to have an addendum or something added to that contract that lists the Feeding America local partners that they will actually be working with. Moving right along, our next question is going to be from Jeffrey Wong. Jeffrey Wong, you should be able to unmute yourself. Please state your name and affiliation and go ahead and ask your question.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you so much to all the presenters for sharing all of your wisdom and experience so far with edible food recovery. My question, I guess, to everyone is about funding, which was brought up a couple of times in terms of, beyond the local assistance grant program. I'm curious what other jurisdictions are thinking about in terms of other funding sources to augment the work that they're doing in this area. I had shared, in Oakland, we're thinking about leveraging our local sugar sweetened beverages tax funding, which has similar goals around reducing hunger and food insecurity. But I know that, there is some Alameda County, participated in an effort through the EPA climate pollution reduction grant funding to potentially get some more funding for this work. But yeah, just, trying to brainstorm as many ideas as we can to continue and help support a lot of the capacity building that was mentioned in all three presentations.
Would one of our presenters maybe be able to speak to that? Or if anyone else would like to chime in but is not currently able to unmute, please, you can go ahead and use the raise hand function and I will do my best to find you in this long list of participants. Oh, Kristen Sales with Sonoma County has something to contribute. Kristen, please go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, hi, Jeffrey. I can only speak to what we have utilized for supplemental funding in Sonoma County. One is a workforce development grant that comes out of the Office of the Governor called Cal Volunteers. We utilize that to use Conservation Corps members to be trained as food recovery services. and to provide free food recovery services for commercial generators. That grant is ending in September, but there is a second round of funding and hopefully it will continue. We are also utilizing, there is a North Coast Emergency Food Systems grant that is being administered by UC Cooperative Extension up here in Northern California for some of our counties. And that has to do with food recovery in terms of making sure that the pipelines we have for food recovery we have a plan for that in case of emergencies and disasters. There's also USDA grants that are available that can be used for edible food recovery, and the CEFG grants that you just mentioned presumably will be able to be used for food recovery once we get those plans from CARB, the state plan. So I would look federal if I were you, and just keep tabs on what's coming down the pike federally, and then it'll eventually get filtered down through the various state agencies. Also, like if you have agriculture grants, state ag grants, sometimes there's a food waste prevention component or food recovery component in those, like carbon sequestration grants, etc.
That was super helpful. Thank you so much, Kristen. It's really good information. Our next question is from Tyler Smith, and I'm going to go ahead and enable you to unmute and tell us your name and affiliation. But I'm going to start you off with a question that the CalRecycle team has for you, which is, could you please clarify what exactly you mean by correctional facilities? So Tyler, you should be able to unmute now.
Hi, yeah, I apologize. I'm actually in class right now, so I apologize if it's a little loud. But yeah, so regarding to correctional facilities, I was referring to either jails or rehabilitation sites. So kind of like more in a broader term. Yeah, I should have been a little bit more specific there. But yeah, so I guess it would be local jails, county jails, federal correctional sites, state sites. So just kind of broad, because I know that it's like a really broad term. So I didn't know if there was a specific food bank that kind of works with one of these facilities throughout the state. So that's kind of why I wanted to keep the term a little broad. But yeah. Oh yeah, and then do you want me to state my question too?
Yes, please.
Oh yeah, sorry about that. Let me scroll back up to it. Yeah, so my question is, are correctional facilities, so again, that broad term, involved in partnering with food banks for the distribution of excess food? And if so, can you detail the nature and scope of these, of what you guys do with them?
Hi, Tyler. Thank you so much for your question, and thank you for your clarification on correctional facilities. So it looks like you are referring to correctional facilities in that kind of more broad sense of prisons and jails. So just to start with that kind of aspect, if a prison or jail does meet any of the definitions of a commercial edible food generator, then they would be required to have an edible food recovery program and work with a food bank for distribution of excess edible food. Some examples of these include a prison that has a hospital, which meets the health facility definition. Additionally, if a prison or jail meets the definition of a state agency, or if they have a restaurant on site that meets the definition of a restaurant under our tier 2 commercial edible food generators, those would all be qualifications. Just another kind of caveat there is sometimes jails and prisons are serviced by a food service provider. In those cases, the food service provider would be the entity that is required to recover that excess edible food as they meet the definition of a tier 1 commercial edible food generator. So hopefully that kind of clarifies that point. In terms of the scope of this collaboration, this would basically entail the prison or jail entering into a contract or written agreement with a food recovery organization or service. Usually that would be an organization kind of locally within the area. I'm not aware of any, food service organizations or food recovery organizations or services that kind of exclusively work with prisons or jails. So hopefully that answered your question. And I wonder if Becky has something to tag on to that.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm gonna give like kind of a unsatisfying non-answer of an answer, but just to say that I'm not aware personally of any food banks in our network that are partnering with prisons or jails to recover food, which doesn't mean it's not happening, but I'm not aware of any. But I will say, just as like a slight pivot, but like sort of relatedly, there was a question which I answered in the chat as a written answer earlier around schools. So just in terms of like government run institutions that may be producing leftover food, there are quite a few food banks who partner with schools and school districts to collect food. We've seen that be successful in terms of, especially if the district that has many schools within it can be coordinated where there's like a central hub for either for schools to take their leftovers to the central hub, or maybe the district is going out to the schools to collect it, so that then the food bank only has to go to one location that's the central location for the district to collect the food, as opposed to having to go to many schools to pick up the food. So I realize that wasn't your question, but just as like another kind of example in terms of sort of government institutions and edible food recovery with food banks.
Awesome. Thanks, Becky. I think we can move on to our.
Katie, I think you muted yourself. Oh, there you go.
Sorry, I'm trying to use the space bar to mute, but also trying to use the keyboard to find people in the participant list. Our next question is going to be from Jessica Reed, or not Jessica Reed, I guess someone attending on behalf of Jessica Reed. But I need a little bit of extra information in order to be able to direct you to the correct person. Are you looking for a CalRecycle contact by any chance?
Yes, I'm looking, because I'm going to be working with Jessica in regards to maximize the tier 2 possibilities for within the Barstow area. I am familiar with restaurants and the ones in our community. So I'm trying to work out an effective plan.
Okay. I think we should be able to find you the appropriate team at CalRecycle to help with this. Is it all right if we send you contact information through the chat?
That would be fine, or you could send the contact information to Jessica. And her and I will get together on it. Well, you can put it in the chat. That would be fine.
Okay, that would work. Or if you put Jessica's email in the chat for us, we can follow up with her later via email.
Okay. Am I just add it to the chat then, or chat or Q&A?
If you add it to the chat function, there should be a way to.
I'm sending it to Catherine then, correct?
Perfect, yeah.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Right, next up, I have a question from Mandy Brooks. It looks like this question is for Josue, and if you give me just a second to find you in our participant list, Mandy, I will enable you to unmute.
Hello?
Hi, yes, you are able to unmute now. Thanks, Mandy. Please, could you please go ahead and give us your affiliation and ask your question?
Oh, okay. Sorry, my internet decided to go down right as you called on me. Mandy Brooks, Resource Recovery Manager with Salinas Valley Recycles. And my question was for Josue. Any thoughts or ideas on how we could gently persuade and encourage our local food bank to provide some of that glorious data that you showed in your presentation? We've had, reached out with the food bank and had what we thought was a really great relationship, but they have really never been able to provide any kind of information like you presented. So I didn't know if that was specific to your food bank or if that's like most food banks could provide that kind of data. Thanks.
Yeah, so I'm gonna pick your brain a little bit, Mandy. So remind me, what is it that you do? And you work for the city of Salinas, you said?
Sorry. Yeah. I am the resource recovery manager with Salinas Valley Recycles. So we are the
Okay.
landfill, transfer station, household hazardous waste, and then we operate a composting facility and do all the outreach and education for AB 939 and all the SB 1383.
Yeah, so I'm gonna put my email in the chat. Please email me, and then we can
Okay.
definitely see if I can put you in contact with one of my colleagues over there.
That'd be great.
Perfect. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Mandy and Josue. Up next, oh, I think this is actually an answer to a question. Oh, I'm sorry, Becky, did you have something you'd like to add to that last response? Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to jump in and say, just to sort of acknowledge that I think a lot of food banks are in the place where they've been doing food recovery for a really long time and have their own systems for data collection and storage and tracking and again, every food bank is different in the way that they do that. And so I think for some food banks, it's an added burden to have to report that data to an external entity. And so I would just sort of like encourage you to think about ways that you can support them in that extra work that's required in order to make that data available. So whether that's engaging them more on like what their capacity constraints are. Maybe they're really struggling with staffing and feel like they just don't have the time and the staffing they need in order to make that happen. Or maybe they have sort of data infrastructure needs in terms of needing software or programs to make that easier for them. So I would just encourage you to kind of ask a little bit about like what challenges they're facing in that data aspect, which may kind of uncover what the blockages are and ways to, help facilitate that. Thanks for letting me chime in.
Thank you for chiming in. We appreciate the extra information. It's always helpful. Etienne Ozorak with the city of Glendale. I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute. I can see that you helpfully answered a question in the Q&A pane, but I'm not 100% sure whose question it goes with. But would you like to talk a little bit about your funding mechanism with franchise agreements?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good, great. Yeah, we built in to our franchise agreement with our commercial haulers that they would provide us with funding to support programs. So we actually, because we're in the Los Angeles basin, we have 4 haulers that operate in exclusive zones. So we split the city in 4, and they collectively provide us with $150,000 a year to fund the the SB 1383 Edible Food Recovery Program. So this was something the city of LA used a slightly different model we kind of tweaked it so that we had funding to hire a third-party vendor to set up the program for us. And we've been doing that for at least 2 years now, which has worked really well. So basically, we pay the third-party vendor, and then we get the funding because now it's stable funding because those contracts are 10-year contracts. So it allows us to kind of just provide some stability to the program.
That is a great idea to ensure that you have sustainable funding source for this program. That is great. Thank you for sharing, Etienne.
You're welcome.
Up next, I have a question from Kim Riley. Kim, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute. Please go ahead and state your name and affiliation and then ask your question.
Hey, thank you. My name is Kim Riley. I work with the consulting firm Economics Inc. down in Orange County. And we, as a firm, assist jurisdictions with conducting food recovery inspections, and we're helping with capacity planning right now. And something that we've been hearing from a lot of folks at food pantries, food distribution centers, is that they're pretty maxed out on their ability to recover food or distribute that food, being like limited staff or inability to send staff or volunteers to drive for pickups. And so these folks that we've been talking to, they're often pretty small volunteer-led organizations, maybe one full-time staff, if at all. So it seems to be like there's interest in recovering more food from a lot of these folks, but the limiting factor is people power. So I wanted to ask the panel if they had any recommendations or resources that they could share to address this.
All right. Josue, did you have
Yeah. So that's something definitely that we see here in our county. And again, as Darcy and Tammy mentioned, we are very fortunate to be a very small county in terms of population. But with the food bank being in an area, that's a kind of a big key factor. And Becky can kind of chime in on this sense too. But as she mentioned, when this kind of rolled out, there wasn't a lot of resources and a lot of monetary support that was. So a lot of the agencies that we had were already doing this without the support. But now that there's a inflation in terms of what needs to be picked up, this is where sometimes the food bank can step in and kind of pick up that excess food and then be able to redistribute it to other agencies through ordering mechanisms. I know that Silicon Valley and Alameda County Food Bank to some extent do that as well. And this is more like for Costco or for those bigger organizations that have more food that they need to divert. The food bank then goes, picks up, and then is able to divert that to their other agencies so that they don't have to go out and do that. Because you're right. A lot of this effort is done on volunteers, and sometimes those volunteers, that's one of the things we learned from COVID, that we needed to do better at succession planning, because a lot of those volunteers that we had were retired folks that met some of those that needed to be home because they met the high probability of getting COVID and all that stuff. So this is where, again, depending on where you're at, I would reach out to your food bank and see what efforts they're already doing, and see if there's opportunities for them to explore of being the ones that go and pick up at some of these sites so that they can then turn it around and distribute it out to the agencies.
Yeah, and this is something I think you could potentially use, or a jurisdiction could potentially use some of their CalRecycle Local Assistance Grant funds to address this. Those funds can't be used to create like a sub-grant program. That is not permitted. However, they can be used to pay for a service such as addressing a capacity gap that exists in a region. So if your jurisdiction is finding that your capacity is maxed out, all the food pantries in the food bank don't have the resources to pick up all of the excess edible food in the jurisdiction, that is something that you can pay them or provide them with resources paid for through local assistance grant funds in order to close that capacity gap and ensure that you're able to recover as much excess edible food as possible. All right, our next question is from Allison Schill. Allison, if you give me just a moment to find you in our participant list, I will go ahead and enable you to unmute, and you can state your name and affiliation and ask your question.
Hi, my question was a response to the question from Salinas about trying to get their food bank to cooperate with them on being in compliance with sending in their annual report for SB 1383, as well as other things that would be nice, like their list of participating agencies and their capacity. It seems like the answer to your question kind of included that funding would be necessary for these food banks. So I've just heard from several different jurisdictions around the state that it kind of seems like food banks are playing a game right now with their cities where they say, we'll give you the information if you give us funding. And I just wanted to make sure that wasn't the precedent that we were setting for food banks to come into compliance here.
Hi, you guys. I could chime in on this one, Kyle, CalRecycle, and Becky. I don't think this is one for you to answer directly, but just know, Allison, and I think to your point, food recovery organizations that do have a contract or written agreement and are accepting excess edible food do have to participate in reporting, and that is the requirement of this law. I think it's best to work collaboratively to try and solve this, and what is the best mechanism to facilitate that reporting. So happy to talk about that offline more directly as it applies to Monterey or others. Thanks.
Yeah, and I'm happy to chime in too, just to say, I think I would just go back to the context that I was sharing kind of earlier when I gave my presentation about, like, I can't overemphasize enough what a sort of crux point food banks are in right now in terms of still elevated demand that they're serving within their communities, and also decreasing sort of public support for the programs that they're running. And so, just to keep in mind that food banks are trying to do more with less right now, and that is really challenging. And so I totally hear you on that tension point. And if I can be a resource in terms of helping to make connections or help facilitate conversations, we're always happy at CAFB to help play that role. And I know you all have access to my email, so feel free to email me anytime. But yeah, I would just sort of speak back to the current context of, like, one of the most heartbreaking decisions that a food bank can make is to shut down a pantry because they don't have adequate funding or food. And that is the decision that some food banks are making right now. And so just to kind of emphasize the seriousness of the capacity needs that food banks have right now in order to keep their programs running.
Becky, just real quickly to add on to that, thank you for that comment. And we recognize and hear this regularly, the need for, quote unquote, sustainable funding. And it is nice to hear some solutions like Etienne mentioned before. Certainly like to learn more about those and others that people are hearing or experiencing out there. So please share with us if you do see those types of funding mechanisms surface. Something we're all looking forward to, based on the fact CalRecycle has had funding over time, but it's been grant funding, and it can be a little hit or miss on its availability, and we try and get that funding out there. But what other mechanisms exist? A good topic for discussion. Thanks.
Speaking on that, for High Desert Second Chance, our food bank, it's just a requirement that our FROs report because of our MOU that we have in place. But even with funding or without funding, our focus has always been, again, feeding the people. So regardless of if we ever get funding, which we've gotten zero, to do our program, except for what we, as part of what we do with our jurisdiction, we've tried going after funding to do our work, and it just hasn't happened. But that's why we structure our program to be beneficial and cost effective for our partners. When it comes to their needs, each of our partners are stakeholders in the collaborative. So if one partner is failing, we're assisting that partner. If another partner is in need of volunteers, or if they need assistance with picking up a load, we step in. The food bank itself is actually, we are the lead, but we also assist them in their needs. We've had to pick up additional supplies for agencies that have, their cars broke down, they weren't able to, or they're in a remote area where they could not get anyone out to come and pick up or deliver. Though, like I said, our partners are stakeholders, and part of that is the MOU agreement that if they are a retail affiliate, they do have to report. And then again, working with the jurisdiction, it's just all part of it. It just makes a huge difference to be able to collaborate and work together.
All right, thanks, everybody. Good discussion. Our next question is from Karen Moore. I'm just going to read it real quick. She's looking for brochures on organic waste to pass out at the Earth Project Earth Day on the 27th. We have some great resources available on iRecycleSmart.com. Our Office of Public Affairs has developed a whole bunch of helpful materials on recycling, including on organics. It includes lots of social media resources that can be shared, but also I believe there's some materials on there that would be appropriate to print. And if you haven't already done so, I would also recommend that you reach out to your local jurisdiction, to the folks at the City of Tracy, to ask whether they have some materials along those lines available. They may have a few that they've already developed in conjunction with your local hauler that are ready to go. So it's always good to check with them. Yeah, does anybody else on the CalRecycle team have anything to add to that? Okay, I will take that as a no. I'm going to go ahead, and since we have just a little bit of time, I'm going to go through a couple of questions that we received early on in the webinar that we have answered in writing. One asks, did you mention when the ORW4 budgets would be approved to begin expenditures? That's for the local assistance grant. The local assistance grant funding for the fourth cycle should be distributed in the next couple of weeks. The next one is, will CalRecycle also be extending the deadline for OWR2 funding as well for the local assistance grant? Extensions are being processed for OWR1, 2, and 3. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass things back off to Mary and also to Marshall.
Thanks, Katie. Christina, did you have something you wanted to add? I see your hand is raised.
No, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Okay, I think we are going to wrap up at this point. Again, all our chats are recorded and will be posted on our website. If you would like updates on future chats, resources, and webpage updates, please subscribe to our 1383 listserv. Thank you, Darren. Thank you all for tuning in, staying engaged, and participating. Our CalRecycle team here really values your input. And I will pass it on to Marshall to close us out.
Fabulous, and thank you so much, Mary. Wow, we heard so much today. Lots of details about roles and responsibilities and effective partnerships, lessons learned, different approaches to increasing our program impacts. It's exciting to hear about the momentum that's been gained, that even reaches beyond the scope of what was intended in SB 1383. We heard a lot about reporting methods and different means of local assistance to edible food recovery services and organizations, as well as technology used for tracking and funding solutions. So again, I just want to thank our speakers and the edible food recovery subject matter experts, the CalRecycle chat team, and all of you, like Mary said, for engaging and participating. You can look forward to upcoming chats addressing effective enforcement programs, as well as the 1383 implementation record. If you're interested in sharing your enforcement approach, please note your interest in the SLCP and .organics inbox, and we'll follow up with you. During this year's conference calls for jurisdictions, as conference calls and site visits, our land representatives will be specifically addressing implementation record requirements. And if you're not aware, the implementation record is a fundamental component of the compliance evaluation for SB 1383. And each compliance evaluation starts with a request for and a review of the jurisdiction's implementation record. And last, or I guess it was late February, CalRecycle sent out a listserv message noting the posting of an implementation record checklist. And this tool is specifically designed to assist jurisdictions with SB 1383 record keeping. So if you have not checked it out, there's no time like the present. And we'll continue to look to you again regarding content for these chats. And based on that, we already have quite an expansive list. And thank you for your feedback. It's critical that we are addressing topics that are relevant to you and successful implementation and compliance. In the meantime, we'll be working really hard on follow-up from today's chat, as well as planning the next ones. And you'll see related listserv messages regarding both here soon. And with that, thank you so much for participating today.